Despite Americans being popular globally, there are some places you shouldn't visit if you are a US citizen. It's not all sugar and spice everywhere, and for various reasons, some countries have a bit of a chill about rolling out the red carpet for folks from the USA. Today, we will be going over the top 10 places Americans cannot visit. Starting at number 10, Myanmar. As of 2014, Myanmar, a country in Southeast Asia, has a population of slightly under 55 million individuals. However, due to recent and historical events, the country has been in a state of turmoil since the military coup in February 2021, with armed conflict and civil unrest becoming commonplace for American travelers. The application process for visas is complicated and comes with warnings. Due to various ongoing issues, such as the arbitrary enforcement of local laws and inadequate healthcare resources, the US government advises against traveling to Burma. Imagine having to apply for a visa that takes 3 working days or longer to be granted, only to arrive in a place where you are advised not to travel. Additionally, the US is imposing sanctions on Myanmar, which doesn't exactly make US tourists popular guests. Number 9. Yemen. With a nation of over 30 million people, Yemen is another place where Americans might feel unwelcomed. The nation has been engulfed in a terrible conflict since 2015, resulting in a severe humanitarian situation for Americans. Travelers are strongly advised against visiting Yemen because of the country's history of civil turmoil, armed confrontation, and kidnapping by terrorists. The US State Department's "do not travel" advice couldn't be more explicit. Good luck obtaining a visa as an American. Yemen is almost impossible to visit for leisure travel due to its tight visa regulations, unstable political climate, and antipathy toward Americans for their alleged role in the conflict and drone strikes. Number 8. Somalia, a nation of roughly 15 million people. This is where things start to become tricky for Americans. The origins of the chilly welcome can be linked to a number of issues in May 2022, such as political unrest and security worries. Although strategically sound from a defensive perspective, President Joe Biden approved the relocation of US soldiers to fight the Al-Shabaab militants, which doesn't exactly make US visitors the most popular attendees at the celebration. Consider the difficult visa application procedure as if it were similar to trying to colonize Mars. Possible, but not without its difficulties. Hostile situations might range from overt security dangers to bureaucratic red tape meant to make your stay less than pleasant. It's a difficult scene, especially in light of the humanitarian crisis that is taking place there, along with the scene of millions of people displaced and struggling for food. It is not a place where you should expect a warm welcome. Coming in at number 7, Venezuela, the home of more than 28 million people. To put it mildly, the US and Venezuela's relationship has been strained due to economic sanctions, political squabbles, and a general climate of mistrust have made Venezuela a difficult place for Americans to travel to. As of August 2023, the country's economic crisis has forced over 7.7 million people to flee, demonstrating the terrible conditions many Venezuelans face. For Americans planning to visit, the visa application process is a maze in and of itself. It involves navigating a system that is inherently skeptical of Americans, if not downright hostile. The country's high cost of living and high levels of tension can make day-to-day interactions feel awkward, and with about 23,000 US citizens, mostly in the Caracas region, the community exists, but so does the sense of being unwanted guests in a home split by politics and economic hardship. Number 6 is Libya. With a population of roughly 7 million as of 2024, Libya is a country that has seen more plot twists than a season of Breaking Bad. So why may an American passport not be the best option in this situation? There are a number of reasons, including crime, terrorism, civil unrest, kidnapping, and armed conflict. The US Department of State currently advises against traveling to Libya. But let's get down to business. The US-Libya relationship has been rocky, particularly since the attack on the US mission in Benghazi in 2012. This event marked a turning point that resulted in increased security concerns and made Libya a difficult destination for US travelers. The complicated process of obtaining a visa for Americans wishing to travel to Libya is further complicated by the government's refusal to provide admission to those with Israeli stamps on their passports. The fifth place American citizens cannot travel to is Syria. Syria is a nation with a rich past and culture, but regrettably, violence has eclipsed it recently, leaving its people struggling to deal with the effects of the civil war. The US has issued a Level 4 travel advisory on Syria, citing risks of terrorism, civil unrest, kidnapping, and armed conflict. The Syrian government's stance towards Americans is hostile due to a complex geopolitical chess game involving sanctions, military actions, and diplomatic standoffs. Syria is another place where Americans may find the welcome mat rolled up, but more so than Libya. For Americans wishing to enter Syria, obtaining a visa is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. The obstacles in the application process are a reflection of the tense relations between the two nations. And even if you succeed, the atmosphere may not be friendly because of the ongoing conflict and widespread mistrust of foreigners, especially Americans, as a result of the US's involvement in regional politics over there. Number 4. Afghanistan. Afghanistan is at the top of many lists of places where Americans might not receive a warm welcome, and for good reason. The country's 38 million people have been at the center of geopolitical tensions for decades. So, to begin with, why might an American be treated poorly in Afghanistan? The U.S. Department of State presently advises U.S. citizens against traveling to Afghanistan because of the country's vulnerability to terrorism, unlawful detention, kidnapping, and criminality. It sounds like the nation is saying, visit at your own risk, but with a strong suggestion that you should avoid it. The advisory isn't simply for show. It's supported by the harsh fact that there are numerous terrorist organizations operating and that Americans are frequently the targets of kidnappings and unjustified detentions. The process of obtaining a visa for Americans wishing to enter Afghanistan is quite difficult. U.S. citizens must have both an Afghan visa and a valid passport to enter and exit the country. Those who arrive without a valid visa risk having their passports confiscated or being deported, along with facing heavy fines. It's as if the nation is saying, forgot it? Too bad. If you were thinking that obtaining a visa upon arrival would allow you to enter the country illegally, think again. The process requires letters from the Ministries of Tourism and Information. Tourist visas are typically single entry, valid for 3 months with a 1-month authorized stay. But let's not draw a complete gloomy picture. The history of diplomatic relations between the US and Afghanistan dates back to 1935. They have moments of cooperation and mutual support. But the overall story, particularly after the US invasion in 2001 to house the Taliban and combat Al-Qaeda, has been one of tension and conflict. This military involvement, which was undertaken for self-defense after the September 11th attacks, marked a significant turning point and set the stage for the current travel advisories. At number 3, we have Iraq. Iraq is a country of about 40 million people. Their relationship with the United States has been turbulent, to put it mildly. It all started with the 2003 invasion led by the United States under the pretext of weapons of mass destruction, and ever since the story between the two countries has been convoluted. So why aren't Americans welcomed? The application process is like trying to drive a car blindfolded. It is true that Americans can obtain visas upon arrival at airports, however it might be quite difficult to obtain a departure stamp for your passport. It's not just paperwork that can make Americans feel unwelcome. The security situation is quite daunting as well, with reports of government officials using torture and other inhumane treatments, and the presence of various armed groups, which is a reminder that the country is still grappling with stability. Coming in number 2 is Iran. Iran, with a population hovering around 83 million souls, is a land of ancient history, breathtaking landscapes, and well-complicated relations with the United States. The genesis of the cold reception Americans might encounter dates back to the 1979 Iran hostage crisis, back when a group of Iranian students took over the US embassy in Tehran, leading to a 444-day standoff. Fast forward to today, and the situation hasn't thawed much. The US State Department slaps a Level 4 travel advisory on Iran, which is basically their way of saying, think twice before packing your bags for Tehran. But why such stern advice? For starters, there's the risk of terrorism, civil unrest, and most notably, the arbitrary arrest and detention of US citizens. In fact, it's not uncommon for Americans, especially those holding dual nationality, to find themselves behind bars on charges ranging from espionage to posing a threat to national security. Now let's talk about visas, because getting into Iran as an American is no walk in the park. The application process for a visa is more like going through a maze. If you're from the US, you may have to wait anywhere from 1 to 3 months to hear back on your application, and that's before you even get to visit the embassy. Depending on your luck, it may only take a few days to 2 weeks. However, there is one thing I should warn you about. Even if you are granted a visa and arrive in Iran, don't expect to swipe your card at the local bazaar. International credit and debit cards are not accepted there, so you better prepare yourself with cash unless you fancy a crash course in bartering. Though Iran is not without its charms, from the bustling markets of Tehran to the historic ruins of Persepolis, there is a wealth of culture and history to explore. Just keep in mind that, as an American, you are in a politically complex and geographically diverse country, and while the average Iranian on the street might greet you with unmatched hospitality, you need to be extremely cautious out there. Taking our number 1 spot, we have North Korea. With a population of about 25 million, North Korea, officially known as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or DPRK, is similar to that neighbor who stays indoors during block parties and observes everything from their window. To put it mildly, there has been chaos in the US-North Korea relationship. The question of why Americans aren't exactly welcomed with open arms in North Korea is a complex one that is exacerbated by decades of political tensions, nuclear threats, and a war that technically continues despite an armistice signed on January 1st, 1953. The US government strongly advises against travel to North Korea due to the significant risk of arrest and long-term detention. Otto Warmbier, an American student who ended up in a coma and later died after being detained in North Korea for allegedly trying to steal a propaganda poster. That incident sent chills down the spine of many and highlighted the extreme risks involved in visiting the country. Getting into North Korea isn't a walk in the park either. Since September 1st, 2017, the US has banned its citizens from using their passports to enter North Korea, except under very specific circumstances. This move essentially puts a giant "Do Not Enter" sign on North Korea for American tourists. But even before this ban, snagging a visa as an American was as tough as opening a jar of pickles. You'd have to go through a specialized travel agency and be part of a tightly controlled tour group, always accompanied by a guide who ensures you don't step out of line literally and figuratively. But let's say you do manage to get in. The experience is unique. There are strict rules about what you can and cannot do, see, or photograph. Want to have a chat with a local civilian? Think again. It's illegal to talk to North Koreans without authorization, and forget about making jokes about the leadership or the country. That could land you in hot water fast. It's a level of control that's hard for many Americans to fathom, coming from a land where freedom of speech and movement are taken for granted. In essence, visiting North Korea as an American is like walking on eggshells while blindfolded. You're never quite sure if your next step will be your last in terms of freedom. It is a difficult place to visit due to the strict visa requirements, the possibility of miscommunication that could result in detention, and the general atmosphere of surveillance. However, some people may find the allure of the forbidden appealing, but keep in mind that curiosity killed the cat, and that there may not be 9 lives in North Korea. If you found this video entertaining or knowledgeable, leave a like, subscribe, and let us know what you think down below in the comments.